The following is meant for entertainment and educational purposes. It is not meant to establish a doctor-patient relationship. Please consult your mental health provider for your mental health needs. Hello, welcome to Chez Eric, my home, where we talk about psychiatry and religion with a focus on how to apply it to your life. I hope to make this super relevant to you as always. And I am Dr. Eric. If you haven't met me before, I'm a psychiatrist who happens to be religious, and I'm creating this space to talk about these things because when do you get a chance to talk about psychiatry and religion? Not too many. So this is the space where we can talk about that. And my hope again is that at the very minimum, it helps you understand your life better, understand your journey better, wherever you are with, let's say, religious concepts or even personal growth concepts. So we're going through the William James series on Varieties of Religious Experience, which has been, I hope, a very illuminating series. And today we'll be talking about conversion, which is a very big and important concept. And conversion, he's going to be talking about in two lectures, lectures 9 and 10. And conversion is the process where somebody goes from not believing to believing in some spiritual thing of some sort. And he really wants to go deep into the concepts of these spiritual things. So why is conversion important? Well, it's important to understand because the religious experience has a very huge component of conversion in it. People have a religious experience, or maybe they went from not believing to believing through a conversion process, through a transformative process. And understanding this transformative process is very important to understand the religious experience overall. So the very first thing to introduce us to the idea of conversion that William James does is that he introduces us to a guy, Mr. Stephen H. Bradley, as a prime example of conversion. And who is Mr. Bradley? I actually don't know. I looked him up, okay, and I only found a book titled, that he wrote, A Sketch of the Life of Stephen H. Bradley from age 5 to 24 years. So it makes sense that if William James is trying to understand people, he would go through a self-biography, especially someone who's, say, a convert of some sort and is fairly religious and known to be religious, and kind of explore more about what that conversion process was. So when Mr. Bradley was 14 years old, he was fully converted, that's what he says, and this is how he describes it. He says, I thought I saw the Savior by faith in human shape for about 1 second in the room, with arms extended, appearing to say to me, come. The next day, I rejoiced with trembling soon after. My happiness was so great that I said I wanted to die. This world has no place in my affections as I know of, and every day appeared as solemn to me as the Sabbath. So that's what he felt at 14. That's pretty sort of intense for a 14-year-old, don't you agree? I don't know. If you've had an experience like that, let me know in the comments below. But that would be what James would observe as his conversion process. 9 years later, though, what's interesting is he says many of the young converts would come to me when in meeting and ask me if I had religion. And my general reply was, I hope I have. This did not appear to satisfy them, as they said they knew they had it. So this is fairly interesting. Someone with such a very powerful experience at 14 years old, and then 9 years later, when asked, do you have religion? The best he can say is, I hope I have. Fairly humble guy, I guess. And how many people who have religion or who believe in God would ever say that they hope they have religion? That's a fairly controversial question, I suppose. We'll probably save it for another time. But it's very interesting to find that this is the introduction that William James brings to us as the example of the conversion process. So before we get into the conversion process, because this is going to be a 5-part series for the first lecture, and then I think a 4-part series for the next one, I forget, we need to first understand a little bit more about psychology. And William James goes into this idea that there are psychological states where a person's ideas, aims, and objects create an internal set or groups of a person's understanding of the world. And in a fancy talk, all it's really trying to say is that we have ideas and concepts, and that interacts with each other in a particular way. The way William James understands psychology is probably going to have, very similar ways we understand psychology today. But we've advanced quite a bit since then, but what we understand today does still have its roots in these, not ancient, but like old writings of sorts. And yes, we do have ideas and concepts that interact with each other. And psychology spends a lot of time understanding how these ideas and concepts and behaviors and goals, how they interact with each other in particular in pathological ways, so that we can help heal someone by undoing the negative connections that exist. So for example, a positive connection would be, let's say you had a really good mother, and then you think very highly of your mother, and let's say you're a doctor, and then you see a patient that reminds you of your mother. Well, then you might have a tendency to connect that idea of your mother with this particular patient and behave in a way that's, more loving and more kind, the way you would treat your mother, as opposed to if you saw a person that didn't look like your mother at all, a tattooed, beer drinking person. Anyway, so that is an example of, what we call transference and how these ideas and concepts kind of come together. What William James points out, is that when you have a group of these ideas and concepts, they see them as sort of discrete things, and they don't really overlap. So the example that he gives is that when the President of the United States goes out with a paddle and a fishing rod and a gun to go hunting and he wants to go camping, he's thinking about the fishing rod and the camping and the gun and then going hunting. He's not thinking about the world and the presidency and all the intricacies of the things that exist. So he can have a sort of a discrete concept here. And having these discrete concepts and groups in our minds creates different elements of ourselves. And so as a result, in the previous lecture, we talked about the divided self. We ultimately can have two parts of ourselves. So the example that he gives, this is my example, not his example, but let's say you're out with your friends and you're goofing off and you're being silly and you're just laughing and playing and whatever. And then afterward, you're done and you go home to your family, you will behave very differently with your family. And there's nothing wrong with this. This is just the way people are. But you behave differently with your family than your friends because they are two different groups in your mind, two different perspectives, two different interactions with the world. And then when you have your friends and your family coming together, right, in let's say a particular space, you begin to feel kind of awkward about how that space sort of exists or how that should behave. Maybe you won't be as goofy, or you won't be as reverent, or something to that extent. And that conflict exists. Transformations when you're spending time with your family versus your friends can happen. And when transformations are when these changes are more permanent, they're called transformations. When the changes are very quick, we don't really think much of them. And so when we have a change in your mental state of your ideas and your aims and your objects in your mind, that's when we're talking about a transformation. And that's what we're trying to focus on when we're talking about a conversion process. That there's a shift between, what you previously understood about the world to now another understanding of the world that includes a spiritual sense or a spiritual center or spiritual dynamic. And, these changes are most complete, right, in ways that the self can be divided. So it says, when you have two parts of yourself, one that is acting and another one that is wishful thinking, what's happening is that the acting is how you're interacting with the world, but your wishful thinking is just wishful thinking. So then you have a divided sense of yourself. You're doing something different from what you're actually thinking. Let's say you say you're going to study, but you actually just binge and watch TV all day long. That is an example of how does the process, how do we look at this? How do we look at a situation where you have someone doing something different from how they're actually thinking, how they believe? And this is where William James kind of gets into this concept of something being at the center of your energy as opposed to in the peripheral. And we'll have to talk about that next time. So I hope you found that interesting. Let me know if you ever had conversion processes below. Let me, if you want to share it or whatever you're comfortable sharing. Let me know about a situation where you feel like people have transformed or you personally have transformed. I'd like to hear about your thoughts and your experiences overall. So I hope you enjoyed that. Do like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you next time. Hey, how's it going? Check out my new website. It's available now. You can learn more about me. You can also check out some things I'll be offering in the future, webinars, books, and whatnot. It's a fancy website with a lot of moving parts, designed by someone who's very, very talented. So check it out when you get a chance. All right, I'll talk to you later.